David Zaritsky for the Bond Experience. Welcome back. A lot of us, we sit here and we talk about complaints. Things like, oh, I don't know that Bond 26 could be years away, but I'm gonna take a different approach on this video today. You see, this is the fantasy time. This is the time where anything is possible because we don't have a film. You remember those days, about a year or two before No Time to Die, even before the trailers, and anything was possible. Could have been Bond on a mission, could have been a heroic ending, and then reality sets in. So now, because we don't have Bond 26, we can sit here with friends, family, and the Bond community and speculate about what we want, what we think Bond deserves in the next Bond movie. Now, this one you clearly could tell by the thumbnail, we're going to be talking all about watches, James Bond watches. And I'd be hard pressed to think of anybody more appropriate to invite to this conversation than my brother, my paisan, and my next guest, Lorenzo Anselmo. What's going on, brother?
Hey, how's it going, David? How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining us.
Uh, of course, it's the Bond experience. You got to show up.
It's a Bond experience. It's also Omega Bond watches. I mean, touche.
Dude, I got to be honest. I still get little butterflies before we do one of these. It's kind of cool. Like I love it.
But you should. I mean, because I think butterflies just means that you use that positive anxiety to bring the energy. And we are so desperate for you to bring the energy because today, usually I'm the storyteller. Today, you're it because we're talking watches.
Well, that is my speciality. So I think I can help you out with that for sure.
Exactly. Well, all right. So for the horribly uninitiated, and there's not that many anymore, Lorenzo, just give everybody a little taste. Your Bond brand, your corner of the world. What do you do? What it's about? Why were you even motivated to start it?
Man, it's kind of funny because when you start getting into like why you started and where you are now, that it's a journey. And I know that me and you've talked about it, and it's kind of like when you first start, you don't really know what you're doing. And for me, it was I love Bond watches, I love Bond style, I love the movies. There's all kinds of aspects of James Bond that I absolutely adore. But I think the thing that is hard is really finding your place and why you want to do it. And I think the question you ask yourself immediately is, what do I have to say and why does anyone want to listen to it? And honestly, I think it was advice you had given me that you said, just dance like no one's watching. And so that's kind of how it started. It started with posting, pictures, and then it turned into now I'm doing a podcast, with the Blunt Instruments podcast with Luke from Bond's Apartment. So then it goes from there, and then you start growing a little more and you start realizing like, maybe I'm so passionate about this, I want to help other people. So I've been fortunate enough to do some stuff with SWAT Group, and I'm able to be a part of people's journey of getting their timepieces. So it's really gone in directions I never could have imagined. I have no idea where I'm going still, but all I can tell you is I'm very excited to be doing this, and it's very therapeutic. And the friendships and the memories, like, I think that's the best part. And a lot of people, I feel like, they'll never understand that unless they're a creator, and that is the joy you get out of seeing your peers succeed and the success you're having. And so that's how I ended up here. So that's kind of a little bit about me.
I love that. And by the way, I think you're right. I think your drug, your high in this hobby is helping others. I mean, literally, as we're filming this today, I saw that you helped two friends get watches. You've helped me get a watch. You've helped my wife get a watch. And she was so happy because she always had hand-me-downs from David. She never had a Danielle watch until you helped her. You were like Sherpaing her through with an event. And this is what you do. And you're really paying it forward. So thank you.
Oh, well, I mean, I like to think I'm the one getting all the benefits from it because I get to be a part of that little memory, And so I think the picture I posted today, it was me, Cassandra, and our friends DJ and Meredith. And after I took the picture, I stopped and thought for a minute. I was like, wow, I was a part of every one of their first watch in one way or another. And it's just, it's that proud moment when you see someone like, have their Omega on their wrist and you knew you played like a little part in that. So I am kind of selfish that I get to say that, about a few
You
people.
you're like a watch pediatrician. You deliver watches to people in a way. It's
Watch.
disgusting. I don't know where I was going with that.
I don't know, but I love it.
Wah, it's a
Yeah,
watch. By the
it's
way,
a
we got to do a
watch.
wrist check. By the
Yep.
way, all right. So we'll
You
do a little
first.
strafing around on me. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No worries. Let's see. Hold on a second. There we go. Get nice and big for this one. So I've got the
Oh.
yeah. This thing is actual size for people. 45.5 right now. This is of course the Planet Ocean from Casino Royale, but I put it onto that. Look at that real estate. Oh
Whew.
my gosh. How's that look to you?
You better be careful. Your bicep might grow a little bit more on that side.
My forearm is like my wrist muscles, everything. But hey, reciprocal, quid pro quo. What are you wearing?
Okay, so today, I don't know, man. I've been having a lot of nostalgia lately. So I am back in my original first watch, which is
Ooh.
the 300 Diver M from Columbus Solis, where they did the James Bond collector's piece. So this was limited of 10,007 pieces, and I threw it on um, a gray. God, now the name's going to escape my mind because I'm on the spot. It's on a gray NATO, but this NATO is special because back in 1973, when the Royal Air Force started issuing NATOs, they issued this color, and this was the only color available. So this is where NATO straps started.
Ah.
So it is. I can't think of the name right now. I'm so embarrassed. It's
We'll
it's
put a logo
especially
up.
gray. Yes, a logo. So it's a special color gray that they used in the beginning, and I've always kind of been like, I like to do the nod backs and always try to make them different. And later on, we'll talk about that, a little bit of that, because I feel like Bond wearing this NATO would say a lot, not just about Bond and his military ties, but also just to watch history. So like I'm hoping it'll happen one day.
All right. Well, listen, the last 007 minutes have been a pure appetizer to the main meal that we're going to get to right now, people. The reason you clicked on this video, we're here to talk about Bond 26 watches. So, Lorenzo, I'm going to let you kick it off. And now we had to set a little bit of a foundation here. You want to talk about
Yes.
that?
So when you came to me with this, I kind of you're like, hey, I want to talk about Bond 26 watches. I want to kind of, I want to have like a template, and you wanted to kind of get into it. And I was like, okay, so kind of give me what you were thinking. And one of the things that you said is like, well, I want to make sure I'm using someone, so we're not just picking a watch for anyone, because I feel like when you do go to pick a watch, it's a very personal thing. So when I'm helping clients and stuff like that, this comes into play a lot. It's not just, oh, it's just for Bond. It's also for the personality outside of that. And when I think back to Daniel Craig, a lot of his influence came from vintage timepieces, which, as we know, he's a big proponent of vintage timepieces and collecting them. And so a lot of the later watches in his tenure, you kind of see him gravitate towards the notes of a lot of like old vintage military watches, which obviously with the No Time to Die watch, we saw, you know, the crow's foot on the dial. We got, a patina look with the brown tropical dial and all that stuff, and the Milanese bracelet. So it was really cool to see those things. I think that's why that watch was so well received, is because not only is there design notes in there that Daniel wanted to include to make it more tool-like, it was also very understated. And I think that really plays to Bond, and Bond being a, double O agent. So I guess that's kind of where I went with my things today. And you kind of like set it up. So we talked about who we thought would be a good person to kind of dress, I guess you could say, or bring into the boutique and kind of sit down with and say, hey, what do you want to put on your wrist because you're the new Bond? So,
Uh-oh.
yep.
Uh-oh. Did we lose half the audience?
We either lost half the audience or we're going to get a bunch of hate mail. But I mean,
I
this
think
is,
people are coming around to him though,
yeah.
because it's so funny. And by the way, you're doing something, and yes, you nailed it. I mean, when I came to Lorenzo, I wanted to make this as much like Lorenzo was chosen as the costume designer for Bond 26 for watches. So we've heard Janet Tamine say this, we've heard Siderat say this. they can't pick out a piece of clothing or accessory without the individual in mind. It's not just about the character. So because of his size, his looks, his personality, we needed to have some individual. He's a little bit of the forerunner for, at least from a popular standpoint. So what was your approach in giving good old Henry something for his wrist?
So this is so funny because last night not on purpose, but I rewatched Man from Uncle, and it
Hmm.
just rejuvenated my love for him possibly taking the role of 007. And I think a lot of things that people put in their mind immediately as they talk about, oh, well, he was Superman. Oh, like he's done this. Oh, he's done that. But here's the reality. Henry Cavill was almost Bond. He was second place to being
Yeah.
Bond instead of Daniel Craig. And the only thing that kind of kept him out of the running, well, the two things that kept him out of the running was number one, he was very, very young, 26 years old, if I recall correctly. And two, Martin Campbell wasn't really sold on his body, which we all
Sure.
know after the fact, dude could eat iron for breakfast.
Yeah.
like he's just incredibly fit, and I don't think that's not anything that ever stopped for Henry. I think he took it personal, and now fitness is a daily part of his life from
Yeah.
the interviews he's done.
We talk about the hashtag Bond 25 fitness or fitness challenge.
Mhm.
He really went on it. They used to call him Fat Henry as a kid, and he just took it seriously. Now fitness is a way of life. He's a geek like us. But
I love that.
he's fought with his body, and health and
Mhm.
fitness all his life. But obviously, this is what you get at the end of that rainbow, so to speak.
I mean,
So,
this picture, when I picked it for this
uh,
slide, I was like, he looks so Bond here. Like I was like, other than the little spot, the polka dot tie there, I was like, this is very Bond.
I think even
So
Matt Speza would approve of that tie. I
I
just
love
think.
that.
All right. So, what was your next part of the whole process?
So the next part was I kind of went into the history of it. Like I wanted to kind of like really like gravitate towards what was done in the past, what we've seen, and kind of like really dive into so people understand why the choices went the direction they did. And as we go along, I'm going to fill in a little bit about each category and like why certain things are certain ways and what we've seen in the patterns that have developed because of things in the past and
Okay.
opportunities we have that are leading forward.
All right.
So here we go. So obviously, right here in this photo, this is from GoldenEye, the first appearance of an Omega watch in a James Bond film, and
Lovely.
it's
Lovely.
I will tell you the best thing about this watch is it's a quartz watch that's very, nowadays quartz watches are kind of frowned upon. And this was the last one I added to my collection. And I'll tell you that when I was adding it, I was like not excited. I was just like, I'm just getting it done. And the thing with this watch is when I got it, I started realizing that there's just so many feels in this watch. And it had been used numerous times after its, first appearance, in different variations, but there's something about seeing that little clicking of the seconds hand. And I adore this watch. This is my go-to when I'm running out the door because I don't have to set it. It's
Ooh.
running, it's ready to go. And I can't tell you how many times that happens because walking out of the house without a watch on is like, very rough for me. Like I don't feel right. I feel
I think you
um,
would forget your pants and underwear before you forget a watch.
yes, and that's probably right.
I can't even imagine that.
I know it's a habit, and it's funny because I've been kind of pushing the boundaries with not only wearing a watch, but trying to wear multiple watches in a day. Which I don't know if you follow
At the
Kevin
same
O'Leary.
time or no, no.
No, 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 no. Like
Okay.
just so I was watching this interview with Teddy Balthazar and Kevin O'Leary, which if you don't know who they are, they're very predominant in the watch community. And one of the things that they did recently is they went to the Omega Boutique in Miami, and I think I had posted this interview they did on my stories. And basically, what they did is they went into a boutique, and they both said, "Okay, we're gonna build a collection in one day. You get to pick four watches. You can pick any four, but you can't pick one that the other person picked." So they took turns, and it was kind of fun to see the way they went about it. But what I love about that is Kevin O'Leary says that he's up to wearing four watches a day now. Like, so he gets up in the morning, he'll do his workout, he has his workout watch, he'll come home, he'll switch into another piece for the early afternoon, whether he's having a meeting or something. And then there's a dinner watch that he'll go into. And then finally he'll finish off with an evening like slammer watch that he goes out with for like late night drinks or whatever. So,
It makes
I mean,
sense. It's almost like footwear. I mean, you would change sneakers, shoes, boots, etc. Why wouldn't you do that with watches?
which is cool. And it's funny because not only did I do that with my watch, I'm trying to do that with my watches. I've noticed I'm really doing it with my sunglasses now. So
Yeah.
that's been a little easier because you keep a bunch in your car, you can switch through them. But I mean, it's a cool concept to kind of take on, so you're
Yeah.
using your stuff more often.
All right. So let's get back to the history here. So started with this of where it began.
Yep. So basically, this watch was not really supposed to be in this movie. It was kind of like it was fought for. Jenny, I'm
Lindy
saying that right?
Hemming.
Lenny. I'm getting mixed up here. Lindy Hemming fought tooth and nail for the Diver 300 to be in GoldenEye, which I know when you interviewed her, she talked about it was a very fascinating interview. But she had talked to actual naval personnel that she had, known for a while, and they discussed like this is the watch we wear. And it made sense. Bond isn't trying to be flashy; he needs something that's reliable. And Omega was providing watches to the Royal Navy at that time. So naturally, she won her case, and thus Pierce Brosnan donned this blue, gorgeous watch, which to me is just such like a different direction from wearing a Rolex or a Seiko or a digital watch, a Casio or anything like that. This was really like a moment. And then obviously me being the age I am, GoldenEye 64, every time you hit pause on the menu, the watch popped up. So it was like they were almost programming you, like, oh, you're gonna like the Omega, So it's kind of funny how that came about. So basically what I did is I wanted to pull all the models and talk about all the styles that we've seen Bond in going forward, and then basically kind of just like dissect it a little bit and then kind of
Sure.
go into the new picks.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Oh
So
boy.
I know this is a lot to kind of handle here, but basically
No, it's great.
what I wanted to really talk about here is that if you look at the last 9 films that Omega's been featured in, we've seen a lot of different styles, but predominantly we've seen certain ones featured numerous times. And so we'll start with what I would consider Bond's signature style, which is the Diver 300M. And we see that in 6 films. Pierce Brosnan wore 2 different models. One of his watches he wore across 3 separate films, and that was the only watch he wore. So it's kind of funny the evolution of how Bond's wrist wear didn't change much during Pierce Brosnan's tenure, which
Yeah.
I think potentially it could have been one watch the whole time. The only difference between his first watch and the last 3 was the movement and a couple little note designs on the dial. But otherwise, they were establishing that this is Bond's watch for Pierce Brosnan. So it's very easy to spot that one, and immediately your brain goes to, okay, this is the Bond watch.
Right.
So, and back then, like they didn't design a watch for him; it was a standard model,
Yeah.
So they just picked from what was currently, being produced. So then we move into Daniel Craig's tenure, and it was kind of surprising what they ended up doing with him is that they ended up putting him in the same watch, just an updated movement and a couple styling differences. So on his, you'll see a little bit more detail, like the logo's not painted on, it's applied. Same bracelet, the case is thicker, and now we have the coaxial movement, which is a more advanced movement than the automatic that was in Brosnan's watch. So he still wore that watch in the back half of Casino Royale, but then he actually started out wearing a Planet Ocean, which is kind of like moves us over. I want to finish on the No Time to Die before I get into the Planet Oceans, but I thought it was very, very interesting that Daniel went back to the Diver 300M because he was very firm about not wearing Pierce's watch when he first took over as Bond. I've read comments, read interviews, or I've seen interviews, I've read comments that he like really wanted to have his own watch. Like that's Pierce's watch, that's not mine. And so when I found out he was going to be back in the 300M diver, I was like, ooh, wow. I was like, so, but it's so night and day. Like
Yeah.
all the military inspiration, like you can't even compare the two. But we've seen there's 4 different models and we've seen the 6 films. To me, this is cooked. Yeah, we know that this Bond wears a Seamaster diver. Like, I get it. But when we see Casino Royale, we see him start out with a Planet Ocean, which is the next series we're going to move into here. We see him wear a 45.5 millimeter, which is like way bigger than Pierce's 41. Yeah, it's a hunker. That is risk presence.
Yeah.
But because of Daniel's physicality and the type of Bond he was bringing to the screen, I think it made a lot of sense for him. And then we see him kind of go into the 42 millimeter for Quantum of Solace, which the only film he wears one watch. But to me, that's a very iconic watch because of the design notes. It's a true 42.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Professor Lorenzo,
I'm rambling
you in the
here.
front. No. This is such catnip watch candy to me. So I have to ask, does he, and I should know this, does he wear like the version I have with the bracelet, the 45.5 in Casino Royale ever with the bracelet, or is it always the rubber strap?
It's always the rubber strap. So since we're on this subject, let me just cover it.
Yeah.
Planet Ocean in Casino Royale is a 45.5 millimeter, very big watch. The one in Casino Royale, 42 millimeter, more full. It's a full size watch, but it's not like oversized. So the only difference between these two watches, other than the size, is the strap it's on. It's pretty much the closest you get to the same watch. So if you're struggling between buying 2 different watches, you could literally get the rubber strap for a 42 or vice versa, like get the bracelet like you did for yours,
Right.
and you can double it as the same watch or the same look. But
So when he does, he uses it as a knuckle duster in Casino Royale briefly. I mean, super briefly. Is that the 42 then?
No. So the knuckle duster he uses the Diver 300M, the blue watch, which So once Bond gets on the train to meet Vesper, that's when the switch happens, and it never comes back.
Got it.
It's kind of funny though, because we don't really see him in a true suit until that scene. So it made sense he had a rubber strap on his watch and it was oversized. So it works. But so it's funny because like I've gone back to look and you could tell they cut the frame down so that it wouldn't show it. Whether it's speculation on my part, but I think Omega was kind of like, hey, we don't want people to think of our pieces as defense weapons, but us Bond fans are kind of like, hey, that's catnip. Give it to me. I want to see it,
Exactly.
So anyway, back to the Planet Ocean. So those two are very similar. So I'm kind of like, okay, Bond's going to be wearing a Planet Ocean for the rest of his time. That's what we would think, So the start of Skyfall, we see yet another Planet Ocean on Bond's wrist, and yet it's quite different now. And one of the biggest differences with the Skyfall watch is the one that was sold was not the one that Daniel actually wore in the film.
Ooh.
And I think most people wouldn't really know this, but if you're like a huge collector, you kind of figured this out. And that is Daniel requested his to be made of grade 5 titanium. And I don't know if it was a thing where they're like, we just want to make sure it's special for Daniel or whatnot, but they never produced that grade 5 titanium Planet Ocean 8500 caliber. You can only get it on steel. Everything else is exactly the same. However, they did make a titanium version, grade 5, in blue. So you can get the same feel, but you just can't get the exact thing. And I've heard of some people Frankensteining them to look exactly like the one he had, but it's like at that point you're voiding your warranty. You're taking on a lot of things. You're buying 2 watches. One's, it's just. I thought about it at one point, and I was like, you know what? I'm okay. Close enough. Don't do it. Don't do it. Yeah. I could see the anxiety on your face, like kind of cropping up as I was talking about that.
Don't do it. Yeah.
So he wears that, gets shot, falls off the train, and then all of a sudden, we see him come back into service, and he's wearing something I never thought I'd see, and that's a mid-size Aqua Terra. So I think a lot of people love this watch for numerous reasons. I think one of the biggest factors is a mid-size has a lot of range as far as fitting, someone with a more petite wrist, someone with a larger wrist appreciates it because it's not as dominant on the wrist, so it slips under the cuff easier. So there's a lot of things that you can get out of a mid-size I just think it's funny because we've never seen an Omega that small on James Bond's wrist. So it's just kind of like one of those things where okay, this is different, and there's no bezel. So, I mean, it's still a sports watch. I think a lot of people refer to it as a dress watch, but it's not. It's still a diving watch, so it just doesn't have a rotating bezel on it. So it has a fixed bezel,
Got it.
but still a great watch. It just, when you compare it to a dress watch, there's certain things you don't really do with dress watch designs, and
Yeah.
screw down crowns are part of that. But Bond's in the man of action. He needs those things. So I can see why they kind of went this route. But that's his personal watch, as it's been stated. What do you think about the Skyfall watch, David? Because I know we've
I
talked about this recently.
I really like it. I think I mean I'm going to need to try it on because I'm just used to 42 or more.
Mhm.
Um, but I love it. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. The face of it, the blue, the striations, just everything is just on point. Beautiful. And it's so different than anything I have.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I loved about this watch. Is another thing is like, for Skyfall, I always think about that scene where he walks out on the deck of the yacht as they're heading to the island to see Silva, and the decking of the boat. The dial
Yes.
always reminds me of that. So there's those little notes in there. But then, so Skyfall ends, and then we move into Spectre and Bond's, Mexico City, and here we are. Now he's in a 41.5 millimeter Aqua Terra that looks almost the same. But I will tell you, there's more differences between these two watches than there is between the two Planet Oceans, which I think
Mhm.
some people don't realize. Um, a lot of people lean towards that midsize, and I always say, when I'm asked this question, they're like, "What's your favorite?" And I'm like, "The 41.5," and it's not because I have a bigger wrist. I like it better because internally, this watch is night and day better than the Skyfall. And
Yeah.
um, one of the biggest advancements Omega made at this time was they had created watches that have 15,000 Gauss anti-magnetic field protection. And so people are like, well, what's that? That's a bunch of words. Well, that's important because there are like magnetic waves that your microwave or a speaker or a computer sends off that throws the timing of your watch off. And the term magnetizing your watch means it's not going to keep time correctly. So then you got to go demagnetize it so your watch isn't working. So now you're running into issues. But this movement is so much more accurate and so much easier to adjust the time. It has a quick set on there. I love that it's a little dressier. Also, a fun fact: the dial on this watch is the biggest dial of all the Bond watches, even the 45.5,
Oh wow.
because there's no bezel.
Ah,
So yeah, so it's a gorgeous dial. I always lean towards this one. I think it's also featured in No Time to Die. So you're getting that continuity, which I wish that would have happened in Skyfall. It would have been nice if you wore the same watch all three films, but sometimes you got to upgrade to the new model.
just more goodies for Lorenzo. That's all
I
I'm
know,
saying.
more problems for me.
More
I gotta collect more.
exactly.
So ultimately, we end on the two little, appearance watches, as I like to call them. They make their quick little. Well, one makes a quick appearance. The other one, it's the focus of the film.
Yeah.
And so I'll start with the 300 that was made specifically for Spectre on the NATO strap. I think this is the first time we get a Bond watch designed from scratch. And I think there's a lot of Daniel in this watch when I see it. To me, it's almost the perfect Bond watch because of all the callbacks in it. So the design of this watch came from the original 1957 diver watch that Omega made. And I just see everything on it. But now you have the modern styling in there. So you have the new NATO strap. It's like I basically call this Daniel Craig strap, because Connery's strap is, the black, the red, and the green,
Right.
and Daniels is black and gray, and this is very muted and subtle. But then you get the 12-hour GMT bezel, which in that movie he's flying all over the place. So like, this is something practical for him. And then there's a hidden weapon in there. But the watch, like just like the DB10, all bespoke to Bond. And unfortunately, it blows the watch up because I love this watch. I think it's an amazing watch, but
It's gorgeous.
it's a gorgeous watch. And I think Omega learned something when they released this watch. They did a limited edition. They did it as 7,000 pieces, and a lot of people weren't able to get one.
Yeah.
And it's just very different from the standard model. And I feel like they're like, okay, with the next one, we're not going to do that anymore. So then we move into, no Time to Die, and they're like, we're just going to do limited production. We'll just make it for a certain amount of time, and then we're going to stop. So I think that was smart.
Yeah.
And then finally, we have the chronograph, which this is the closest thing Bond gets to a dress watch during its Omega run. And if you blink, you'll miss it. But it's just, for me, it was just a shock when I found out. And then it was a pain to find. But it's a true dress watch. It's under 35. It's under 36 millimeters. It's a 35 millimeter watch, and it's just stunning. It's a 1965 chronograph Seamaster, and you just, when I got this watch, it's just so different from anything. So different that it actually made my taste evolve from how I looked at watches. Because if you look at all these other watches, nothing is smaller than 38 millimeters. Nothing is a chronograph. Like, this is very, very different. And I think that makes it even more special. It's on a leather strap. We don't have any other Bond watches on a leather strap here. So these are all things that kind of make me think like, oh, what could we go with this kind of design? Which I think this one gets overlooked a lot. So you'll see some of this kind of going into my
Okay.
pick.
But I love this process because, number one, people are, we're into the meat of it because we didn't want to just throw up a couple watches and go, that's our pick. Thanks for your 5-minute video. This has been David Zaritsky and Limit. No, we wanted to go through what could it be like? What would Lorenzo do if Omega and Eon came and said, dude, you are the man in 2 years from now? What is he going to be doing your process? Folks, this is a sneak peek is what it is. But now the big question, Lorenzo.
What now, 007? The direction of a new Bond and a new watch. I think there's a lot of opportunity here. I know I said that earlier, and I think there's a lot of things that have happened since Daniel's final film. We waited so long for it to come out. Sean passed during that time, and there's just a lot of things that happened to this franchise and being sold to Amazon, and there's just so much movement in. It's almost like a changing of the guard, and you just kind of go, what's been missing? Because I think one of the things that I'm missing from not just the watches, but from the franchise as a whole is the innovation. Like we're doing it our way. We're doing it fresh. We're going to be the first one to the dog bowl, so to speak.
Wow.
And I feel like I'm going to bring it up. If you listen to our podcast, we did like 5 episodes on this, but I see a lot of this happening in the Mission franchise and them pushing the envelope and trying things and being bold. And Bond created that. So back to the basics, honoring the past in a different way was kind of where I went with my first watch for the new Bond. And I thought about Sean Connery a lot. I mean, we're still kind of like getting used to Sean not being around. And in his first appearance, the first watch on his wrist, it's debatable, but it's said that he wore a gold Gruen on a leather strap, black leather strap. And whether that's the right brand or not, regardless, we know it was gold. We know it was black leather. And back in the day, people didn't wear dress watches with tuxedos. It was actually a form of disrespect to your host because basically it kind of gave the mantra that you wanted to get out of there. So over time, people started accepting watches as not just functional items, but as a way of showing your status and wealth. And typically they would be very small, very understated, and they slide under the cuff. And I think a lot of people can vouch that it's very hard to see the watch when you see Sean wearing it because it's so small and it's so tucked up on his wrist that anytime his cuff moves, you just get a little glimpse of it. And that's how it should be. But I thought putting Bond in a watch we've never seen him in a long time would be a great way to like show, hey, we're changing things. So gold, something we've never seen on Bond's wrist before. A white dial, something we haven't seen before other than the chronograph he wore that was a vintage. But this is a dress watch. I could see Henry wearing this underneath a tuxedo and just being like, just very debonair, maybe with some gold cufflinks. Gold is definitely coming back. And I just think it's a good way to kind of freshen things up. I have a bunch of silver watches. So I'm like, I mean, the price point on this is going to be very gulp. but
What's the price point?
I think it's around 15,000.
Ah,
Once,
okay.
yeah, once you start getting into the precious metals, the price really shoots up. But again, this is a statement piece, for an elevated event. This is not an everydayer. I mean, at least I wouldn't consider this an everydayer. I would wear this watch, to meetings or to a formal event. But I do like the fact that it's a 40 millimeter. It's very simple, very understated. I could even go without a date on there, and I would be
Mm,
fine with it.
super clean.
Obviously, yeah, I picked all my picks from what's currently in their line. I am going to talk about some of the changes I would make, if I could. So the things I would present to Henry, I would present this watch. I would make the recommendation for using a no date. I'd also make the recommendation for having a very clean dial, no writing on the 6 o'clock part of the
Mm,
watch. So very,
okay.
very neat. Maybe even downsizing the logo a little bit, which I don't think Omega would be okay with that. But basically getting it really close. I might even go down to a 38 on this one too,
Wow.
just to make it more along the trend of a dress watch of the past. Another great thing about this is you could do it on a brown croc strap, of that
Mm.
sort. So this really harkens back to that old school kind of vibe. And I think that's something that would be extremely different than what we've seen up until this point. So um, moving on, though, obviously
By
Bond.
the way, before we go on, I love the fact, I got to give you credit here, is that it is it's always what I call the straddling of vintage and nostalgia. So the gold watch meeting kind of the modern Bond, I think is a really very cool thing. Um,
Yeah. And I also think
Love it.
another thing that gets forgotten is that dive watches only became popular with suits because Sean started wearing one in Goldfinger, So,
Yeah.
and that trend has continued, and there's nothing wrong with it. Trends change and evolve, and I've had many discussions with our good friend Matt Spacer about this subject, and it's really funny. But I mean, I do think it's time to,
Yeah.
no pun intended, to get Bond in a dress watch. It's something that is elegant. It's very tasteful,
Mhm.
and I just think it would be a nice little change. One other thing I would recommend, I would show them this watch with a date window with the writing, and one that's very simplified, no date window at 6 o'clock and no writing at the bottom. Another thing I would show them is I would show them one that is in what do you call it? White gold, a
Oh,
cannabis. Omega calls it cannabis gold, which it's a white, but got to be on brand here. But I think if gold is just too hard of a push, that would
mm,
be a nice way to kind of ease your
yeah.
way back into
Middle
it.
line.
Middle
All
line.
right. So we're going to move to the next one, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Oh, boy.
So Bond can't be without his blue watch. I feel like it's been a while since we've seen a blue Bond watch other than the Aqua Terra. I mean, with a bezel. I mean, a sports watch. But I want a new twist on this. Like,
Okay.
no Diver 300M. I want something that is, again, harkening back to vintage notes. And now the model I picked basically the 300 Diver, which
Ooh.
is a redesign of the Spectre. There is something I would change though immediately. So I wouldn't present it like this. I would present it. Everything would be the same. The only difference would be is all the markers and the numbers would be in white. It would not be the patining because I feel like that's been overdone. We've seen it in the
Ah.
last two Bond watches. I think it's just I want modern, clean, moving forward. So I think that would be great. And this picture doesn't do this watch justice. If you've seen it in person, this watch is a midnight navy. It is not
Ooh,
blue. So
no.
now we're getting in that realm of ooh, we're straddling black and blue, but it's just gorgeous.
Dude.
And yeah, so I love the conical crown, which if you don't know what that is, if you look at the crown on the
Yeah,
right,
I could see it. It's almost like a
it's like
cupcake.
yeah, so that's a very old school thing that they used to do. It makes it a little easier to grip. Um, Also, another thing I would do is the Seamaster 300 at the bottom. I would probably move that to the top just to kind of be in line with the older models.
Okay.
Not the older models, but the first Bond watch to make it a little bit more symmetry. Also, I would definitely leave the sandwich dial though. I love that. So basically, the numbers are cut out, and there is a loom put underneath, like a layer, and it just sandwiches, so it
Mhm.
creates texture and depth on your dial. So I love that, and so I think that would be a great look for Bond.
You know what? I gotta tell you, I know you want this in white, which would look so striking, especially in the midnight blue. I kind of like the patina. I like that kind of nautical look to it. Like it's has a story to tell.
Yeah, I mean that it's something I struggle with, but the only reason I'm going white is because we had two patina dolls, and I'm like, I want modern. That's why I fight for that one.
True.
But
True.
either way, like it's right on line with that. The only other thing I would like to see is instead of a lollipop dial, I would like to see an arrow dial. Or seconds
Mm,
hand. Instead of a lollipop, I want to see an arrow.
okay.
Even though I
Legit.
like the lollipop, I just don't want people to look at it and go, "Oh, well, it's like the Spectre but blue." No, I want it
Right.
to be different, you know. So
Yeah. To
that
stand on
was
its own.
exactly. Now, I'm very of the mindset that no matter what watch we actually do get for the next Bond film, it will be completely designed for that person, and it won't be anything that's in the current line. But these are the small adjustments I would make.
I
So
love it.
I think this would be a great. This is your watch. We've only seen a 300 once. We've never seen the second generation 300 in a Bond film. So I think this is a
Wow.
good way to kind of, you know, take another step, I guess you could say. But just lastly to add, this has the same bezel as the No Time to Die. So it's fully loomed,
Oh,
just like the No Time to Die, which,
nice.
as you know, that was the only Bond watch to have a fully loomed bezel. So you're still getting those new, technologies in this watch. So we are getting, kind of out there as far as, how much retro we want to go. But I really think that this would be a solid choice for Bond.
Nice. All right.
So
I
now you can't have Bond without having some badass moments in it. So, um, getting the job done, Bond's tactical watch needs
ooh,
one. I'm very, very big on Bond wearing multiple watches in the film now. I used to hate it. Now I love it because it gives you an opportunity to see what scenarios that certain watches are appropriate. And again, with this one, I would make a couple adjustments, but for the most part, I like the design of the watch. So I pick my choice, I should say, is the Planet Ocean. I want to see the return of the Planet Ocean. This is the third generation version, which it's a little shinier for people. I think that's one thing I would change about it is that the bezel material is not ceramic, just ceramic, because you get reflectiveness. It's hard to read. I would actually go with what Skyfall has on that Planet Ocean, which is a ceramic matte bezel. So I would go with that one. This is actually a ceramic casing. So I'm
hmm.
sure there's going to be people that are like, Bond wouldn't wear a ceramic case because it could break. Let me tell you something. If Omega's making ceramic cases that crack and fracture, then I don't think they'd be doing too well in that department, and they would stop
Right.
making them. Like it's a durable made material. I love it because it's hyperallergenic. Like you're not going to get, and it's very scratch resistant, like
It's
grade two
gorgeous.
titanium. Yeah. So I love
Oh,
this look. That's a rubber strap that looks like woven fabric.
oh,
So
that's rubber.
it's rubber. I know. It completely fools the eye. So I absolutely
Yes.
love that. And my thought was instead of that 24-hour GMT they got inset there in the watch, instead of doing that, that could be a timer or a detonator of some sort um, to set as a gadget. So here we are, we're looking at all different aspects of the watch, but changing the functionality of a piece of it so that it is more deadly and more on Bond.
I
so
love it. Oh my
so
gosh.
this is something could see, and a lot of this design came to me because I was thinking of the Living Daylights. I was thinking about
Oh,
the tag that he wears in the beginning of the film,
yep.
and it's a night dive. It's got like a fully loomed bezel or dial, I should say, but I don't know. Fully loomed dial is just a little much for Bond, in my opinion, being on a secret mission. So I think this would be like a great stealthy watch and getting him like sneaking in somewhere of some sorts and kind of like Goldfinger, like setting off a bomb and just
Right.
slipping into his tuxedo. So this was my final pick.
I love it. And Lorenzo, I've got a little surprise for you because
Ooh.
what I didn't tell you, and
Mm.
legitimately didn't tell him, ladies and gentlemen, is we didn't know anything about Lorenzo's picks. He didn't tell me. He sent the PowerPoint. I put it up. We got on this call. But I chose two watches that I really liked from the existing collection, as if I was picking them out too. And it's interesting because a lot of the same reasons, but I'm happy to say they were kind of different watches. So this one I absolutely love. But of course,
Yes.
these are the ones that I picked. Uh, Planet
Very
Ocean 600, yeah, the Master Chronometer 43.5. I like both of these. I like the white, but I also like the orange. I think it's kind of interesting.
yes.
Obviously, very different types of bezel markings on them. But what do you think about these?
So it's so funny because the GMT was one I actually looked at and I was like, they make one that's exactly the same but with silver numbers. And I was like leaning towards it and I was like, hmm. And I was like thinking about it and I was like, ah. And then I was like, no, I want to do different material. And like, so I'm very big on making the watches very different across the board. But that to me is a very like on bond brand kind of watch. And I love the 24-hour GMT, which is something we haven't seen. So again, you're going down that road of, like this is something that would be awesome to see Bond use. I could definitely see him wearing that across like the whole film, more of like a all through the film kind of watch. And then the one on the left, that to me is very classic, which is pretty much when we had done this. You did a styling guide with us like maybe a year and a half ago.
Hmm.
And I did like a little segment and I had picked a watch for Bond. I think we used Henry Cavill there too, but I had picked the same watch but in blue. So I mean, we're right around. I mean, we're circling the drain with these picks. So I mean, I
Yeah.
think there's a big calling for Planet Ocean on Bond going into the next film.
All right, so I want to talk turkey here. Let's talk real stuff. First of all, those were fantastic, and it's fun to kind of do this wish list fantasy. I think if
Yeah,
anybody else in the Bond community had done this, it would have come across a little less authentic. But even you put the right thought and mind into this. However, I'm going to ask you a couple questions,
sure.
to which again we didn't rehearse any of this. These are from the existing collection. Like you could watch into an Omega boutique and get
Yep,
these today, correct?
100%.
So what is, and I think you mentioned this earlier, the likelihood of any of these three being the center watch is pretty unlikely.
I would say there is 100% chances unlikely just because of the
Okay.
design patterns of how Omega has been going about their Bond watches. It is very customary now to build a watch for Bond, a main watch. We got that in Spectre. We saw the success. Moved on to No Time to Die. They did it again, and it was funny because like each time they've done a watch, I've followed the trend of what they've done and what they've adjusted, and we've only gotten two watches that way. So in Spectre, they kind of said, "Here's the kitchen sink, go." So it came with the bracelet, it came with the NATO, it came with the watch tool, it came with this glorious box, and it was just like this, whoa. But it was limited edition, and they realized real quickly that maybe we shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
So then we move on to No Time to Die, and they corrected some of the things. So they're like, okay, a lot of people were struggling with the price point, because these things they're not cheap. I understand that, and so I think the idea is we're gonna call it the 007 edition because not only does Daniel Craig 007 wear it, but Nomi wears the watch when she's an MI6. Now, I feel like there's a missed opportunity there to make the connection on why that watch was on their wrists. Because for her to wear it and him to wear it, like it's kind of like, so why? That's where my brain goes. Obviously, it's
Yeah.
not pertinent to the story moving forward, but as a collector and a fan, you're kind of like, well, why is she wearing it? Obviously that she's wearing it on NATO straps, so they came out with two styles, and I think that was to create a lower price point to make it a little bit more palatable to get into one. But I don't know. For me, it's if you're spending 8,000 and you're spending 9,000, why don't you just make one and just call it this is the Bond
Yeah.
watch for the movie? And everyone refers to it as the No Time to Die. Just name the watch the No Time to Die. Like that's
Yeah.
like not that big of
Because
a deal.
everybody else will do it for
Yeah,
you otherwise.
I know. So I think that was something that was kind of like, because the other one was called The
Yeah.
Spectre. So I was like, oh, just call it the name of the movie because that's how it's going to be referred to anyway.
Well, oh, sorry. So here's where I was going with that and saying they're absolutely going to design a watch. That means potentially, you don't have a magic 8 ball. Potentially the other two, maybe the kind of commando version that you showed,
Yeah,
the getting the job done, and the more dressed up watch could be existing collection with a centerpiece as the custom bond. Could that happen?
exactly. Yes,
Ooh,
absolutely. And I think there's a good chance it will. So I would say at minimum, we'll probably get 2 watches with the next film,
yeah,
if not 3. And I mean, it's a trend we've been seeing. I mean, in Spectre, we got 3. In No Time to Die, we got 2. And it's just like, I mean, it makes sense. Like, I think when you really think about the journey of Bond, it makes sense in the circumstances that he would switch in different watches. Um, I do hope that they do consider like doing something a little dressier when he is in that like formal setting because I think
yeah,
it really would be like a different direction. And I also would like to see that watch, whatever it is, to continue throughout the run of this actor. Like
yeah.
this is his tuxedo watch. And then, the diver or the main watch can change, but you want one like the Aqua Terra kind of started doing that. It was like, oh, this is
Yeah.
Bond's personal watch. But let's see that span over 3, 4, 5, 6 films, as the constant.
I have a total Bond geek question. They're not finished yet.
I love this.
So would you want the watch to be just, Bond's watch, a luxury piece that he tells the time and it's part of his accessories, or do you want it to be a gadget as well?
I want there to be a gadget if it fits in with the story. If it, I mean, I miss the old days of like they show a gadget and they don't even use it. Like it's there, and who knows? Maybe in the pre-title sequence of the next movie, that's when it gets used. Like it's like you only see it for a second. But I think like gadgets are great, but I don't want it to be something that's like, oh, well, we have to do it.
Yeah.
And I thought it was great what they did with No Time to Die. There wasn't a gadget; it was added on at the end.
Yeah.
So it was like it wasn't something that they're like, oh, well, the gadget's always there. No, it was Q upgraded his watch, which that was actually a really smart way of doing it. I thought that was actually brilliant.
It was
I would have
amazing.
I would have liked to see him add an opportunity to buy that piece to add onto your watch, as like a little
Yes.
add-on. That would have been awesome. Like why not?
How is some prop person not made that yet? It seems
I
so
don't know.
simple.
That's outside my pure view. I don't know how to make things like that, but if someone did, I know it'd sell like hotcakes. Maybe Omega will. Who knows?
All right. I got one last question to end this whole story. Um, Bond 26 comes out. Your fantasy comes true. Sure enough, they have 3 watches. May not be these 3, but they are 3 watches, just like you noted. Does Lorenzo from Omega Bond watches, is he compelled? Does he have to get all 3?
1,000%. To the
Math.
dismay of my wife, she will probably be chasing me down the street with a knife, but I that's that's the job. I'm a mega bond watches, and it's I wouldn't feel right if I didn't have it.
Yeah.
And I would. I just can't say I wouldn't. Even with the No Time to Die, when I first saw it, seeing that watch in person and seeing pictures of it, it's night and day. Like it's not
Oh,
even the same,
100%.
not
Totally.
even close.
Yes.
And when I saw the pictures, I was like, meh. And it was just like, well, I'm buying it. So regardless whether I love it or not, I'm still buying it.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's kind of when you go from, well, I want this for myself to I'm collecting. So, but I wear it, I enjoy it. I love my watches differently. Everyone goes, "What's your favorite?" I'm like, it changes. It
Of
changes.
course.
Stop
Oh, no.
asking me
Yeah.
because it's going to change. But I mean, I definitely, when you get more than 1 or 2 or 3, you start getting into this. Well, in this scenario, I wear this one. And in this scenario, I wear this.
You taught me that so well because, and you remember this also well.
Mhm.
I would get a new watch and then I would wear the hell out of it. That was the watch that I wore until maybe I got another watch, and then I would wear the hell out of that. Maybe revisit one of my old ones. Ever since you were like, dude, these are accessories that you can, like sunglasses, like footwear. I switch up all my watches throughout the whole week, different scenarios, different moments, and I'm getting so much more pleasure out of my Omega watches than I've ever had before, not seeing them as love focus. It's not like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't love you as much, I had to put you down. It's like you said, it's like Sophie's Choice. You love all your children.
Yes. I'm glad you didn't euthanize any of them. I mean,
No.
I
Where did
mean,
that come from?
it's kind of funny because I feel like it would be very easy to be like, oh, when the new Bond watch comes out, I'm going to sell mine and get the new one. And it's like I feel like a lot of people did that with other,
Regret.
and then they turn around. I can't even tell you. I can't even tell you how many times I've been messaged. I wish I didn't sell my No Time to Die, and the person went back and rebought it. It's
Oh,
happened
wow.
I numerous times, and it's funny because uh, I mean, if you're gonna own one watch, you got to pick one. But if you're gonna own more than one, sometimes it's okay to hold on to it for a little bit, and then when you're like, okay, it's been years and I haven't worn
Yeah.
this thing, but you just have to learn to appreciate it for what it is, and you'll. For me, my No Time to Die, I wear it a lot. It's very comfortable, and the comfort is why I gravitate towards it. But
Of
in
course.
certain scenarios, like I told you, I'll go to my quartz, my Goldeneye, because it's convenient. Or I don't want to like be so flashy. Like to me, I wear it
Yeah.
on a leather band, and it's just casual. Like, and I don't have to think about anything other than pick it up, put it on. So it just becomes like, oh, in certain scenarios, I grab this or I grab that, or I'll tell you if I'm meeting up with someone and I know they have a watch, I try not to wear that one. So like that's something I do. So it's just, and I think I've gotten away from trying to wear my watches exactly like Bond because I feel like I was falling into that trap of, well, Bond doesn't wear this on a NATO. Bond doesn't wear this on a leather strap. He wears it on
Mhm.
this bracelet. But now I'm starting to like, throw my own taste in there, make it my own. And I know I've talked
Yeah.
about that with clothes, but you don't want to fall into I'm cosplaying. You want to make sure you're enjoying your pieces because they're a part of your life. So that's kind
I
of
love it.
what I've been focusing on with my watches.
Dude, thank you so, so much for doing this. This was
Oh,
so much fun. It was a long time in coming, but I know people are going to enjoy it. And by the way, we will leave links below because you've got to follow this gentleman's antics and surround sound. Lorenzo he does it all. Somehow he finds time to do it all. But thank you so much for coming on, man.
absolutely. Anytime, man. I'm always here to talk about anything James Bond. I mean, that's just comes with the territory. But thanks again for having me
Absolutely.
on, brother.
You got it. Well, listen, this has been Lorenzo from Omega Bond Watches. Omega Bond Watches. I don't know where that came from. And David Tritsky for the Bond Experience. We'll see you all real soon. Take care. Thanks for watching this episode. If you want to be up on the latest from the Bond Experience, just click on this subscribe and subscribe to our channel. You're going to get all the latest and greatest information, plus some exclusive content. And by the way, speaking of content, here's something especially for you, just because we know you. Talk to you soon.